You are listening to the new man, beyond the macho jerk and the new age wimp. Your host is men's coach Tripp Lanier.
What happens after you make all of your dreams come true? What if hope is just another form of evil? And are we making life harder than it needs to be? Mark Manson sold millions of copies of his last book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. And he's back with a new one called Everything is Fucked. Today, we're going to talk about why he's out to slaughter our sacred cows, why hope makes us fight one another, and why success tends to make us weak. I gotta ask, why'd you write this book? Like, what was going on in your life? You kind of took, you break out the 50 cal and just go to town on a lot of sacred cows. It's a Tarantino movie with dead cows, dead sacred cows everywhere. So I was like, all right, I'm familiar with this stuff from my own background in Zen and reading some German philosophers back in the day. But it was like, okay, what's going on in your life that had you? What's going on? What had you take this subject on?
Oh my God. Yeah, I might steal the Tarantino, going Tarantino on sacred cows. Two things happen. Well, actually, I should say three things happen.
Right.
One, I feel like, Subtle Art came out maybe, I think, 2 months before Trump got elected. And I really feel like 2016 is the year that the internet broke, that social media just fell apart. Like everybody started realizing that how all of the negative effects that this is having on our culture. And I don't even mean that specifically with Trump. I just mean the election in general. Like it was such an ugly cultural moment. And it hasn't really recovered. And that same cultural moment has happened in a lot of countries around the world. And I noticed this. So that was kind of a background to all this. It's just like, my God, what the fuck is happening? And I feel like everybody kind of feels that way right now, regardless of what your politics are. So that was one. The second one was Subtle Art blew up in 2017 and just started selling an obscene amount of copies, and just basically put me in one of those financial situations, like a dream financial situation. And on top of that, it pretty much every goal that I had for my career as an author, I knocked them all out in like 3 months. So it's like the shit that I imagine myself being like 50 and like work, it's like, all right, I'm going to work on this for like 20 years. And then in my 50s, I'm going to like hit these milestones. It's like, no. 3 months, you just bang them all out, your first book. And that was, it was actually really disorienting because it's really messed up. Like nobody tells you that when your dreams come true, you don't have dreams anymore. And you don't know what to hope for. Mm-hmm. So that actually, it became a little bit of a personal crisis. I think 2017 was strangely one of the darkest and most confusing years of my life since I was a teenager. Which made no sense because everything was amazing. And the worst part was I couldn't like complain to anybody about it because they're like, well, fuck you. You just sold 1 million books. Like, what do you have to be upset about?
Yeah.
So that was very disorienting. And I think I needed to sort through that. Like, what was it that I lost that was so, like what pulled the rug out from under me emotionally and psychologically? With that amount of success. And then the third thing was I always go through this period when I finish a book where I feel like very empty. Like I don't like intellectually, like I don't know what to think about, or like I kind of lose curiosity for a period of time. And strangely, the thing that got me excited again intellectually was philosophy. Like I read some philosophy in college, and I enjoyed it, even though I didn't really understand a whole lot. and I don't know what it was. Somehow I ended up, I bought one of Kant's books. It's the one referenced in my new book. I think I got in an argument with a friend or something over something really stupid about like ethics or morality, and he was just shitting left and right on Kant, and I was like, well, shouldn't we read the guy before we just start shitting all over him? And yeah, I went out and bought Fundamentals to Metaphysics of Morals, and it's like an 80-page book, and it just blew my brain wide open. I was like, holy crap, this is so deep. And so, yeah, I found a lot of inspiration, and like philosophy kind of strangely carried me through this period and reignited my passion and my curiosity and my excitement for writing again. And so all three of those things kind of, you just finished the book, so I'm sure you can see all those three things coming together in the book.
I can, and it really helps to hear this from you. Yeah. You know, I don't know if there's a way to, hopefully this message will get out more, because it doesn't get revealed. Your personal, what happened to you personally that led up to the book, but it is a deep book. It's really heavy, and it does take the gun to the sacred cows. And without that, it can kind of be like, well, what's going on here? So it's much more human to me to hear your humanity of like, hey, I don't really feel like I got everything I ever wanted, and then life just it turned into its own dark night. It turned into its own challenge of. Yeah. I don't even know if I could talk about this without sounding like a dick, And so I've experienced versions of that. I work with people that experience versions of that. So this is kind of this private club of like, I can't talk about this, but why the hell am I not feeling better about what I've created? And then we just start to question everything. It's like, wait a second. Yeah. I thought if I got to this spot, it was going to be a lot different. Is that kind of what it was? You had an imagination like it was going to be a little bit different once you got there, or if you ever got there?
Absolutely. Well, I think that's the thing with dreams, right? Is we never think about what happens after them.
In my book, I say dreams are assumptions, right? It's like, oh, once it's going to be this way. It's not even explicit about necessarily what it is. Yeah. It's just going to be different, right?
Yeah. But it's funny because when I finally did start talking about it, I have a number of friends here in New York and like the startup world. And it was actually there that I found a lot of people who were like, oh yeah, I totally get it. Like guys who, had a startup, they busted their ass for 8 years and then exited with millions of dollars. And they're like, yeah, the year after I exited was like one of the darkest periods of my life. Cause it's like, I was 33, I was a millionaire, and I had no reason to get up in the morning. Like it's a very weird thing.
I'm a dragon slayer and there's no more dragons. It's kind of like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's interesting to hear you say that about humanizing the book. I actually, in a very early draft, I actually wrote up that personal experience in the first chapter. And maybe it's just my insecurity, but I removed it because I could just foresee all of the, 1-star Amazon reviews saying like, this
privileged guy sold dickhead, right?
Yeah, it's like this guy sold 5 million books and spends the first chapter complaining about it. And so it just like I'm kind of walking into the firing squad on that. So, but it's true. I mean that is where it came from. I mean, success, it kind of fucks with you a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. So. You take you're confident and you're straight in the title. You don't mix things up. Everything is fucked, and it is a book about hope.
Yeah,
but there's a sense of like, oh, it's gonna go somewhere and it's gonna bloom and blossom. And it's more like a French film, It's but like I said, it's nothing new if you've kind of read into some of this stuff before, and I appreciate how forthright you were. But I remember I emailed you yesterday when I finished it, and I was like, Jesus fucking Christ, man! Yeah, it was a punch in the gut and a punch in the chest. So let's go down this road a little bit, because there's not much that we can really pick apart here in 20, 30 minutes. But I do want to kind of go down a couple of roads here and just explore some of the pieces that we've got. I mean, the first one is, what's wrong with hope? You know, I remember reading Fernando Flores talk a while back, you know, his famous quote of hope is the raw material of losers. But in your book, you take a little step further. You say, what if hope is not the antidote to evil? What if hope is just another form of evil? So, okay, let's go. We got a cow in the sights. Let's knock it down.
I pull a little switcheroo on people. You know, I open up the book with a Holocaust story, which I did that for a few reasons. One is to just kind of lay out. I feel like the Holocaust is the most kind of universally accepted narrative of evil in our culture. You know, it like that is probably the one thing. If you ever meet somebody who doesn't think the Holocaust was evil, like, that is an awful fucking human being. So we all agree on that. So I wanted to, because we're wading in, the whole book wades into the waters of like ethics and morality and like what is good and what is valuable. I wanted to start somewhere grounded on solid earth that we all can agree, you know, like this is bad. And I use that to kind of frame the whole introduction of the concept of hope and why we need hope and why hope, you know, gives our life a sense of meaning and all this stuff. And then about halfway through the book, you know, I kind of pull the rug out from people and I say, you know, it's not just hope that defeated Hitler. Hope is also what created the Nazis. Hope is what created Stalinism.
Their hope for a world without Jews. Their hope for a world without, you know, without the enemies that they had.
Exactly. So hope is it's like anything else in life. Like you can have, there are healthy forms of love and there are destructive forms of love, and there are healthy forms of hope and there are destructive forms of hope. And I think kind of the argument I try to make in the first half of the book is that, you know, all of us are in this place in our culture right now where it feels like everything is fucked, everything's going to hell, and we're desperate for some piece of hope, some news, some like, tell me things are getting better, tell me things are going to be okay. And I kind of just wanted to make the point that like that's part of the problem, is that desperate desire for some piece of news or some event that affirms your beliefs of what is good in the world. That desperation is part of what is driving us apart and creating all these problems in our social fabric.
How so? How do we identify that? Because I think we can all understand, okay, well, that's bad hope and this is good hope. But what does it look like in our own life when we're treading into this unhealthy form of hope, as you talk about?
I think it's basically the more desperately we cling to our hopes, the more certain we feel and the less open we are to alternatives. So if you truly believe that, you know, let's say the country's going to hell, and it's like we're on the brink of civil war or political crisis, you are actually going to be a more fervent supporter of whoever your side is. And you're going to be less amenable because to be open to dialogue with the other side is to let go of that hope, is to hold that hope more loosely, which means basically just letting more fear in. So it plays out on a social level, it plays out on a personal level too, you know, in relationships. I think one of the most damaging things in personal relationships is having this unrealistic fantasy about your partner. You have this fantasy that they're gonna fix you or make you happy, or that you're gonna fix them and then you'll be happy. And it's that sneaky hope that gets injected into your decision making and how you evaluate your life, that it causes all these problems. It's like you don't know if your partner needs to be fixed. You don't know if you need to be fixed. All you know is that you're together, and you know you either feel good or you feel bad in each consecutive moment. and you can make a choice. You can do a good thing or you can do a bad thing. And it's like hope doesn't even have to enter the equation if we don't want it to.
I wonder how much this overlaps with one of my coaches, Phil Stutz. He talks about exoneration. He says that we're all kind of buying into this expectation that if we follow the rules and we do what we're supposed to do, we get the money, we get the power, we get the women, or whatever that is, then we'll be free. We'll be free from uncertainty, pain, and effort. And so we keep thinking, as long as pain keeps showing up, we must be doing it wrong. So we double down and we keep going and we keep pushing and we make ourselves more miserable. Something must be wrong with me. Something's wrong with life. Something's unfair. And it robs us of the ability to actually enjoy who we are and what we have. Keyword there is expectation. Are you swapping those words there? Hope and expectation? Like, okay, in the future, I expect it to be this way because I buy into these beliefs and I buy into these behaviors?
Absolutely. I think hope, the way I define hope in the first chapter is that it is an expectation of a valuable future, of a future that is better than today. So I hate
today, but tomorrow's I'm banking on tomorrow. I'm not really happy today, but I'm banking on a better tomorrow.
Right. So it's, like a very simple, superficial example is like, man, I really want a new car. Like a new car would make my life so much better. That is an expectation of something of better value in the future. And as everybody knows, that it's those simple hopes and expectations that get us into trouble. It's the same thing, it's like, man, if I was just married, or if I had kids, like, man, my life would be so much better. I mean, you apply it to anything because it is the fundamental process of our psychology. It's we have to have some sort of vision of a better future in our mind, but how attached we are to that vision, we get to decide. And when we attach our well-being to that, right? Whether it's like we can still play for stuff, right? We can still, hey, I want to write my book, I want to get a car, I want to have kids and everything, but we got to watch out for where we attach our well-being to that. Yes,
that expectation or that hope.
Yeah, it's basically it's where we attach our meaning, So it's like, look, a new car is great, but it's not going to make you a better person. It's not going to make you a happier person. And I think we just have to be realistic about that. And if you extrapolate that out across, kind of all human endeavor, you could say the same thing about, our economy, a business growing, a political system. It's when the right is in charge, everybody on the left is like, man, if we could just get rid of these righties, everything would be better. And it's vice versa when the left is in charge, and it's like it doesn't actually fix anything. I mean, things change, but it doesn't necessarily, like the title says, everything is fucked. So no matter what, there's always going to be a sense of problem and a vision for a better future, no matter what we do.
Okay. Let's take on another sacred cow. Let's talk about religion.
Yes.
And you've got 3 different types that you talk about here, but from your perspective, what qualifies something as a religion?
So I basically expand the definition of religion to be so broad that it kind of encapsulates almost anything. Basically, my argument is that a religion is a faith-based belief that something matters, and most people find that faith-based belief through some belief in like a God or Jesus or Muhammad or whoever. But even secular and atheist people do this too. It's like I have a faith-based belief that a certain moral code is better for humanity. A lot of people have a faith-based belief that that they love their family and their kids, and if they're a good person, then that they will live the good life. All this stuff is based on faith. Like, you can't prove or disprove that you're a good father. You can't prove or disprove that you made a difference in the world. All these things are just kind of invented in our own minds. And so in that sense, I argue that we're all religious to varying degrees. It's just that some people base their religion on kind of supernatural beliefs, whereas most of our religious beliefs are actually not supernatural. They're natural beliefs. They're, I classify like capitalism and communism as religious systems. It's, we have evidence that capitalism has been superior, but it's not, ultimately it's the belief that it's the best system for society. It's a faith-based belief. And then same thing with interpersonal relationships. Like it's my love for my wife, the idea that this relationship is important and gives my life meaning, it is a faith-based belief. Like I could be single my whole life and live an important life. I could be married 6 different times and have a fulfilling life, but I've chosen to commit to this person, and my belief is that if I stay committed to her, then it will fill my life with value and meaning. And so even on an interpersonal level, there's like these like little mini religious beliefs that we have. And so the reason I frame it that way is because I think it's much easier to talk about human systems in general when you see that it's all kind of the same thing. Because whatever we have faith in, we tend to look for other people who have faith in the same thing. We gravitate towards one another. And then once we come together, we form our own like little religious cults together. We all decide like, hey, these are the good guys, those are the bad guys. We all share our hopes for the future and this is how we want the world to be. And it can be something as simple as a family. It could be followers of a sports team. It could be political parties, or it could be, Buddhism or Islam or whatever. It's all kind of the same thing. No matter
so we
how
find some kind of thing to say, hey, this is what gives my life meaning and purpose. And then I find my tribe around that. And then, but it sounds like the shadow side is that then I stop looking, or I stop being curious about others. I can actually start to demonize others. I can start to have a bias against others, or a bias towards my own. I want to confirm my own beliefs. And what happens there when we start to play that game?
We need conflict. Like you can't, this is one of the things I talk about. One of the kind of the criticisms of hope is that hope implies, to have hope for something implies that there's something wrong with your present state, the present
have
world.
Hope if there's not a problem here and now? Why have hope for a better future if right now is just fine?
By definition, to hope for something, you have to reject something that's current. To hope for something in the future, you have to reject something that's currently happening today.
Is that true, or can I just hope that it maintains, like things are good today, and I want it to maintain that?
Well, to hope for that, you would have to reject everything that's not today. So,
okay, I don't want to go too deep here. I want to play that. Okay, I can see where this is where it turns into a week-long conversation. All right, got it.
Yeah, this is when we become like stoner kids in a dorm room. But like,
did police dogs freak out other dogs? Like, did the dog, oh
but
shit,
true.
man, it's the cops, Yeah.
By definition, to maintain hope in some future something, we need to reject something that exists today.
Okay.
And so it's that rejection, like ultimately it's by that rejection that conflict actually becomes something that we need as humans to feel a meaningful and purposeful life. And that's really fucking depressing.
Well, it is. I mean, if you've meditated for any amount of time, if like when I watch my brain, it creates conflict. It needs conflict to exist, because the whole threat in meditation is you're going to drop into formlessness, and the ego doesn't have any place there. So it freaks out. It's like let's create a drama, some kind of thing to play out in my head so that I can exist here. So death is like, without conflict, there's an essentially I cease to exist, or our group ceases to exist. It seems like there's an externalization of that. Without somebody to fight against, we've got nothing to unite against, and we don't exist anymore. We lose. Yeah, we lose it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, my background is, I mean, I grew up Christian, but I studied and practiced a lot of Buddhism in my younger years. And I actually, there's an end note in that chapter that I point out that this kind of cycle of hope conflict that I talk about is pretty analogous to the Buddhist concept of like samsara, of this like cycle of attachment, conflict, destruction, new attachment, and that it just kind of never ends. So yeah, it's kind of the sad and upsetting conclusion is that it's some sense of conflict is built into us. Like we need some sense of conflict to feel as though our life is meaningful and purposeful. And that really sucks. That actually puts us in a really tricky situation of you need to choose that conflict very, very carefully.
Or just to recognize that when we hope for things, we set ourselves up to create conflict. I think that's the point that it might be new news to us as we read this book, is like, I didn't know that when I hoped for a better future with XYZ, that I suddenly created a polarity. Now I've got an enemy, or now I'm working against something. And I've invited conflict into my life when I set out to harmlessly hope for this better future.
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. You talk about pain. You talk about pain being the constant. That's a real fun one.
Let me find this section. I went on a podcast the other day. It's funny, man. Like I must have been
you do manage to make this funny. I gotta say, like it is fun. My new favorite term is douche canoe. I got that one. I hadn't heard that one before. That was a good one. You somehow make constant pain seem really enjoyable and fun. That was
yeah, it's like a fun pessimism. If you don't mind, I'll read an excerpt really quick. I went on a podcast the other day, and the first thing the guy did is he read these couple paragraphs. Look, time out for a second. Let me be the one to break the bad news to you. Human pain is like a game of whack-a-mole. Every time you knock down one kind of pain, another one pops up. And the faster you whack them, the faster they come back. The pain may get better. It may change shape. It may be less catastrophic each time, but it will always be there. It's part of us. It is us. A lot of religious spokespeople out there make a lot of money claiming that they can beat the pain of the whack-a-mole game for you once and for all. But the truth is that there is no end to the pain moles. The faster you hit them, the faster they come back. And that's how all the douche canoes in the religion game stay in the business so long. Instead of admitting that the game is rigged, that our human nature is so fundamentally designed to generate pain, they blame you for not winning the game. Or worse, they blame some nebulous them. If we could just get rid of them, we'll all stop suffering. Pinky swear. But that doesn't work either. That just transfers the pain from one population to another and amplifies it.
Right now, Robert Smith is jerking off, right? He's Robert Smith in the Cures. He's getting the lotion out. He's like, oh, yeah.
But yeah, I go on this guy's show and he like read that and he's like, why even talk to you? It's like, if we can't do anything, like why are we even having this conversation?
Yeah, well, why are we, in your mind there is something something that you're hoping for, and you talk about that at the end of the book. I don't want to reveal that, but there is I think you're pointing to, we can have a different relationship to pain.
Yes,
instead of seeking and buying into people's manipulations to escape it, and hey, I must be doing it wrong if I'm not escaping it. You're offering another path, and we got to be careful here because it can turn into another fucking trap, right? Okay. Exactly. So without turning it into another path, what is this alternate relationship to pain that you see? That why is the pursuit of happiness something we really want to keep an eye on?
Because it's the funny thing about pain is that the more you avoid it, it doesn't lessen pain. It actually, like I have a chapter called Pain is a Universal Constant. And it's because when your life gets more comfortable and secure, your pain doesn't drop at all. You actually just become more sensitive to it. So what used to upset you like maybe losing your job used to, like the amount of pain you felt from like losing your job or something, like if your life was just a total mess. Once you like get your shit together and get more comfortable, something like your seamless order arriving incorrect, like will upset you just as much as, say losing all your money used to years and years ago.
You don't know how many 55-year-old fragile rich guys I talk to, right? They've
God,
reached this
imagine.
level of success, and I got to watch out. I can turn into that too, but it's just like, okay, I've arrived. I've got all this power. I've got all these resources. I've got all this reach. And now I'm just turning into this fragile wuss. Like I'm so afraid to take chances. I can't tolerate any kind of discomfort. I won't do anything that might make me look like an asshat and a failure. And it's just, we get fragile as we get older instead of, wow, I've become this powerful person. No. You're just going to sit on that couch and rot now.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the pain level remains the same all the time. And so the more comfortable we get, the more sensitive we become. And the opposite is true as well, is that the worse things get, the more resilient we become, or the more pain we experience, the more resilient we become. There's just a million examples of this. I mean, everything from, like I mentioned in the book, like I have a big tattoo on my right arm, and it's, it took like 8 hours. And I remember when I first sat down, like the needle hurt so much that I was like, I can't believe I just signed up for 8 hours of this shit. Like I was like, what the hell was I thinking? And by the third hour I was dozing off and taking a nap. So it's just our body, both our body and our mind adjust to keep us at a level of mild dissatisfaction and mild discomfort, no matter what our circumstances. And if we're not careful, if we as a population and as a culture get too comfortable and get too spoiled and entitled, we will start seeing large degrees of pain where they're actually very small, which is, in a nutshell, what I think is kind of happening in our culture today. Which is another reason why I opened the book with a Holocaust story, because I know a lot of people are going to buy this book. A lot of people who see the title and buy the book because of the title, they're buying it because they're under the assumption of everything's completely fucked today. Everything we know and care about we're losing, please like tell me how things are going to be better. And you open up with a Holocaust story, it's like,
wake up.
Perspective. Yeah. It's a little bit of perspective.
Wake up. Yeah. Quit bitching and have some appreciation for where you are. So we don't want to run away from pain. We've got to be smart. I like how you said we got to choose our pain wisely, but let's give up this hope or this expectation that a successful life, a meaningful life, a purposeful life, whatever you want to call it, means that we're going to finally escape pain. And that when we try to escape pain, that just invites more pain. It makes us more, and it makes us more fragile. It has us, for me, what I noticed is we just stop engaging the things that actually mean something to us, because all of those things are outside of our comfort zone. All of those things require effort. All of those things mean we're going to step into uncertainty. All of those things mean we're going to fuck up from time to time. And if we're not willing to go through those experiences, then shit, we just go backwards. We shrivel up. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
You talk about deserving, you talk about this desire to equalize, and I don't know how deep we need to go into that, but I was talking to the group that my coaching group this morning, and we were talking about this notion of deserving, and how if we don't feel that we deserve XYZ in our life, whether it's pain or it's a reward, especially if I'm working with a client and we're creating something, if they don't feel they deserve it, then they're going to invent struggles. They're going to invent obstacles. They're going to invent things to put in the way so that it doesn't happen. And I see this a lot with guys who think life needs to be hard. Like if it was easy, then fucking everybody would do it. Like there's this kind of addiction to hard. Difficulty, I should say. So it's like when, hey, whatever. But that idea that it needs to be difficult, that somehow difficult means that I deserve it. So what's your take on that? How does that kind of fit in here when we need to equalize things so that we don't believe we deserve shit in our life? And I just see that creates a lot of pain and creates a lot of unnecessary suffering in our life.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I talk about in the book is that I draw a distinction. There are kind of two parts of our brain. I call it the thinking brain and the feeling brain, but you could call it a lot of different things. But basically, our thinking brain is the kind of in charge of like making lateral connections, making logical connections between events and experiences. And then our feeling brain is what decides what is valuable and what's not valuable. So, my thinking brain understands that a baseball thrown at me is the trajectory is going to, hit me in the head or whatever. But my feeling brain is the one that decides that because that hurts, it is a bad thing, and the person who threw it is a bad person. Or my feeling brain might decide that I'm a bad person and I deserved it.
I had that coming.
Yeah. So exactly. I had it coming. And the problem with the feeling brain makes all these decisions about how valuable we are, how valuable the people in our lives are, how valuable the world is. But it's illogical, it's irrational, and it's unconscious. So we don't have direct access to it. So this is why this sort of work is so difficult, because we're all a bunch of thinking brains, conscious thinking brains here, like very rationally, logically trying to sort out all these evaluations that our feeling brains have made about ourselves, in relations to women, relations to our career, relations to, money, family, whatever. And so it's extremely difficult to untangle. And the thing is like you said, if my feeling brain just decides, like this is from my personal experience, is that my feeling brain just, because of shit that happened in my childhood, decided that I didn't deserve love from women. And so pretty much through my adolescence and most of my early adulthood, I would every time a woman would start to get close to me, I would start having these emotional outbursts that were really irrational and actually self-sabotaging. Like I would just become a huge dickhead and sabotage my relationships. And it took a lot of therapy. It took a lot of introspection. It took a lot of dealing with my shit, talking things through with the women I was with to kind of sort that out in myself and realize that I had this wound, and that because of the wound, my feeling brain had decided that, either women were not deserving of me or I was not deserving of women. And it just created this like very ugly dynamic in all my romantic relationships for many years.
It seems like there's a tie-in here with that desire for conflict, right? So if I don't feel like I deserve XYZ, whether it's financial success or love or recognition, appreciation, or just even security in life, I'll create the conflict. Now, I may hope for that. I may say I want those things. I may even be actively trying to make it happen, but there's the saboteur working to say, wait a second, that's not gonna, you can't actually have it. And I just see this a lot where guys I just can't seem to figure out why this isn't happening, why it isn't working. And it can be, you can call it shame, low self-esteem, whatever, but there's this aspect in there is like, I've just seen, it's like, it's really hard to work around this thing if you don't get it out in the open and take a look at it and see just how hard we make our lives, how much we work against us. Life's already difficult enough, but how much we can become our own obstacle in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And it, like you said, that process of getting it into the light, of like bringing it out, talking about it, being, accepting it, what that process is it's basically the thinking brain taking that experience and rewriting the meaning behind it to create a new sense of value, a new sense of self-worth. And so it's, the way I frame it is that it's the way to heal ourselves is to kind of get a dialogue between these two brains, is to integrate our logical self and conscious self with our illogical and irrational self. And it's not easy. It's really complicated.
It's really messy. Yeah, we had Jonathan Haidt on here a while back. We talked about the elephant and the rider, kind of a similar modality. You referred to that in your book too. But yeah, how we think we're all rational, but really the rational is following the feeling. And you call it the clown car. When the feeling guy overruns the thinking guy, then we're off to it's clowns. It gets nuts. We can certainly see that in others. It's kind of hard for us to recognize when we're in our own clown car.
Oh, absolutely. Because we all think. I actually kind of poke fun in one section of the book. You know, it's I like tell the reader, I'm like, you are the thinking brain reading this right now, and of course you think you're in charge because you think you're just fucking great, you know. Like, but it's true. We all of our conscious minds, you know, overestimate ourselves. The analogy I use is that most of us think that our thinking brain is driving and our pesky feeling brain is like a loud, obnoxious child in the passenger seat, and we're like telling them to shut up. But it's actually the opposite. The feeling brain is driving, and the thinking brain is sitting in the passenger seat, imagining that they're in charge and that they're deciding where the car goes.
This book is definitely a treat for the thinking brain. It's one of those like, hey, I'm fucking smart, man. I'm reading this shit. This has got a lot of good stuff. Like, we've been kind of, playfully talking about how dark this book is, and I don't want to give that impression that it's that difficult. It just deals with some difficult stuff. It deals with some sacred stuff, and especially if we're banking on a lot, we've really invested a lot into these religions, as you say, whether it's money or whatever it might be. It can be very, very challenging to consider that we might want to look in a different direction. And you bring a big stick to those things too. So what is it that you like when somebody reads this book? What do you really want for them? What's the thing that you want them to realize or start to practice on the other side of reading this book? It's one thing to go in there and lay waste to these to these sacred cows, but what's the ultimate? I know you want something else. What is it?
Sure. I think there are practical lessons kind of sprinkled throughout. So I think I have a different take on, say, self-discipline than most people, like how to develop self-discipline and willpower than most people. I think there's my take on resilience and why and how to build resilience is a little bit different than most people. But I always think, even though I get classified as self-help, that moniker always bugs me a little bit. I don't like being in the prescriptive business. I like being in the descriptive business. I like pointing out how our minds work, how our brains work, and where we get into trouble with ourselves. And people can take that and use it however, it fits their life, especially a book as broad as this. That's the other thing, I guess, that was kind of influenced by the success of Subtle Art is I was super surprised after Subtle Art. A lot of like Christian people, like pastors, ministers, a lot of Muslims love the book. They see their religion, reflected in some of the messages and stuff. My politics lean left, and most of my readership is left wing. I started getting invited on the conservative talk radio shows, which really surprised me. And they love the book. They absolutely love the book.
Well, it's a big message of personal responsibility.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to write, and I feel like a book we so need a book today that is able to talk about what's going on in our culture, without taking a side. I feel very, very few people are in a place to do that or are able to do that. And I wanted to take a stab at it because I think it's important. And I think it's important that people, no matter, like you said, no matter what they subscribe to politically or religiously, get something that is going to make them reflect on their beliefs, their behaviors, and their assumptions about others, essentially.
I was really appreciative, when people, I get asked about this masculinity stuff a lot, just for the nature of having a show for men. And it's just like, it's not about, I don't see the issues being about masculine, feminine. It's more of like who's mature and immature. Like whoever's showing, and that was a huge part of your book. And I was like, thank fucking God. You brought a real rigor to that conversation. You backed it up with research much more than I would have. But I was just like, thank you for that. Because when we act like kids, we're dickheads to each other. It doesn't matter what you got in your pants or who you identify as. And when we can be adults, then we can hold a lot more perspectives, and we can treat each other from a better stance. And so you clearly point out that, hey, when we act like adults, when we bring some maturity to these things, oh wow, there's a whole different thing. So it's not about left, right, up, down, whatever that. It's just a matter of like, let's bring some maturity to these conversations, and everything will take care of itself much more easily from that perspective.
Absolutely. And I think, I think the connection that I made that, to my knowledge, I haven't seen anywhere else, is that, everybody rants about social media and everybody rants about how terrible the news media is these days. And I think what is missed is that it's not necessarily the platforms themselves that are causing the problems. It's that the nature of the technology and the amount of comfort that our technology has been developed to provide makes us all juvenile. Like, it encourages juvenile behavior. It encourages juvenile thinking. Because juvenile thinking is comfortable. It's not, being an adult is difficult.
It's also the lowest common denominator. It's like, okay, we can all meet here.
Yeah. And it's kind of scary because it's, I mean, you on the same level, like you can't really blame the people for developing the technologies either. Like everybody, it's cool now for everybody to shit on Zuckerberg and Twitter and all these people, but it's like, they thought they were doing a good thing too, because they were operating under the assumption that if you make communication and connectivity easier and simpler for people and more comfortable for people, good things will happen.
Adults, let's be clear, adults. If you make it clearer for adults, it can be a good thing, right?
But it's what they didn't realize is that you've got the pain's a universal constant. So the more comfortable you make things for people, the more they'll find problems and shit that doesn't matter. And B, it's the nature of how we interact with each other today encourages a juvenile level of thinking, which nothing works when we're all a bunch of fucking kids throwing food at each other.
Yeah. Well, I love that you brought that challenge to look at things more vertically. Like, okay, where are we taking our stance there? Because to me, like, that's the big key. It's like anything. It's a huge step. So beautiful. Okay, the book is Everything is Fucked, a book about hope. Thanks so much, man.
Thanks for having me.
If these interviews are helping you, then please visit The New Man on iTunes and leave us a positive review so others can discover the show more easily. Thanks for listening.